Good afternoon. My name is Pierre Gobet. I'm the head of communication at the Swiss Mission. Thank you for joining us for this press briefing with the permanent representative of Switzerland and president of the Security Council for this month, Ambassador Pascale Baeriswyl. Also with us, our political coordinator, Andrea Baumann. So the ambassador will have a few remarks and I will take your questions. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear members of the press corps. Let me wish you a warm welcome to this press briefing. Switzerland is very honored to be the president of the Security Council for the month of May. And you probably know it, it's the very first time in the history of our country that we have that privilege and also responsibility. It makes us feel proud, but much more than that, very humble. So let me say a few words as the Swiss ambassador before turning to the Council's work, and maybe as a general disclaimer, whatever I say beyond the dates and the meetings on the agenda will, of course, be in my national capacity. So from the start of our term in January, our overall approach has been to work for unity of the Council, respect for each other, and we would like to engage as a bridge builder, keeping the focus on the many contexts that require the Council's full attention. We are principled in our call for the respect of international law and the UN Charter by all members everywhere and at all times. During our campaign, we promised to be A+ for peace, and we work hard to put this in action. For many years, Switzerland has been involved in peace processes and ceasefire negotiations around the world. We see the increase in violent conflicts and their changing nature and protracted duration. It is for us clear that we not only have to work hard to defend international law and multilateralism, existential for a small and mid-sized country like ours, but we also have to find new approaches to conflict resolution. During our Council presidency, we will be guided by this aim in the sense of a leitmotif, which echoes the vision behind a new agenda for peace. We hope to make a contribution to this search for effective ways to build peace and sustain it, and that goes, of course, far beyond this month of presidency. With regards to the working methods of the Council, our main focus will be to conduct all meetings professionally and in close cooperation with all Council members. We will be guided by mutual respect and take inspiration from our own political tradition of consulting broadly, seeking consensus, and arriving at decisions in a fair and balanced manner. We will work towards a transparent and effective Council, and we also place a high value on the voices from outside the Council, be it interested member states or representatives of other organizations and civil society. As some of you may know, our interest in working methods of the Security Council goes back a long way, and we have been coordinator of the Accountability, Coherence and Transparency ACT group. As a coincidence, this group will celebrate its 10th anniversary tomorrow. So we will have a presentation of a new research report on working methods by the independent think tank Security Council report. Turning now more to the concrete work of the Security Council, the provisional program of work was adopted this morning. You have the handouts, and we will also provide an interactive, up-to-date information on the Council's work on our website, aplusforpeace.ch, or just flash the QR code we distributed. Many meetings during the month are mandated, and we have the mandate for the UN Special Mission in Iraq, UNAMI, and the sanctions regime for South Sudan, which will have to be renewed by May 31st. The Council is also expected to adopt its annual report to the General Assembly during the month of May. We will then have regular meetings on Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Sudan, South Sudan being Abyei, Yemen, the G5 Sahel, the situation in the Middle East, Bosnia-Herzegovina, the DPRK Sanctions Committee, and the ICC prosecutors briefing on Libya. The annual briefing by the chairperson in office of the OSCE, which is currently the Foreign Minister of North Macedonia, is scheduled later this week. May is a busy month in the Council's calendar. In exercising its primary responsibility for peace and security, the Security Council must, of course, pay full attention to conflicts and crises around the world and be ready to convene, discuss, and act where necessary. We will continue to follow closely the crisis in Sudan, the situation in Afghanistan, in Ukraine, and of course, all other parts of the world. In our two signature events, we seek to highlight some of Switzerland's priorities. So our Foreign Minister will chair an open debate this Wednesday, May 3rd, under the agenda item of peace building and sustaining peace. Because changing security challenges require fresh thinking, and with a view to future generations to whom we owe responsible action today, we place the debate under the title of Future-Proofing Trust. We will hear from Volker Türk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who will address the Council for the first time, from one of the African Union Youth Ambassadors for Peace, as well as from a civil society representative, bringing the voice of science into the discussion. We hope that this debate will generate useful insights for the upcoming report by the Secretary General on a new agenda for peace, but also for ongoing discussions among UN member states, generally speaking. The President of the Swiss Confederation, Alain Berset, will chair the annual open debate on the protection of civilians on 23rd May. This issue has a long-standing tradition in Switzerland and is a key priority for our term in the Council. We have been engaged over the past years in making the so-called POC Week a moment of genuine stock-taking and action-oriented discussion between member states and civil society. On the basis of the Secretary General's report, the open debate will address conflict-induced hunger, food insecurity, and related challenges, such as the protection of critical civilian infrastructure. We will have as briefers the Secretary General, the ICRC President, and also a civil society briefer. And then on May 25, on the occasion of International Peacekeepers' Day, we will be commemorating 75 years of peacekeeping. Stefan just mentioned it. Our Minister of Defense will be here. And as you may know, the oldest mission, UNTSO, founded in 1948, is headed by a Swiss force commander, Major General Patrick Gauchat, who will also be here. The Security Council will hold a briefing on the Secretary General's report on predictable, sustainable and flexible resources for AU-led operations authorized by the UN on that day, on the 25th of May. As indicated, and to conclude, we formulated a number of working method commitments. Apart from the interactive homepage already mentioned, we will seek an active exchange with the wider membership throughout the month, with the presentation of our program later today, 2 open debates and an interactive wrap-up session at the end of the month. We are convinced of the valuable contributions made by civil society briefers, and we believe their insights are relevant to the Council's work. So we will seek to invite civil society briefers to address the Council and take every care to ensure that this is possible in a safe way. We are a signatory of the WPS, Women, Peace and Security Shared Commitments, and we commit to gender parity among the briefers. We have been engaging specifically with women civil society briefers to this effect. It will also be the start of, and that's a first in the Council's history, 4 consecutive Council presidencies under female ambassadors, which inspires my colleagues and me, so we will certainly come up with some ideas, the 5 of us. As you see, this is a very dense program in challenging times, and we are looking forward to this. It is, as I said, the very first Swiss presidency of the Security Council, and we will do our best for the Council, the international community, and peace and security. So I thank you for your attention. My wonderful team and myself are always here for you. And when it comes to press questions, you all already know Pierre, who is always your man. And now I will gladly take some of your questions.
Yeah, we'll look forward for your questions. Thank you, Ambassador. And we'll start with you, Edith.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, on your first presidency of the Security Council. We hope that you will talk to us often on the way in and out of the Council. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. You mentioned at the very start of your presentation that Switzerland is going to be striving for unity. You are following a quite contentious Russian presidency of the Council. How is this going to be possible, and what events or event are you planning on Ukraine? Because I assume that there must be something this month. There has been every month since the conflict started.
Thank you very much. So on the first question, we will try to adopt a very Swiss approach, trying to consult everyone, to be inclusive, to exchange, to strive for consensus, to look for solutions, and if that's not possible, then to make an effective and transparent way of decision-making possible in the Council. I think when it comes to the chamber, you will witness some heated or polarized discussions, because that's often also addressing some publics at home. So I think we will try to conduct those meetings in a calm way. When it comes to closed consultations, I may be asking in a little more active way also council members to really stay respectful with each other, but I trust that this is going to be possible. When it comes to Ukraine, there is no meeting on the agenda at the moment, but there is several pen holders, and several pen holders already indicated that they may come up to us and ask for meetings, and if council members come up to us and ask for meetings, we have the intention to put it on the agenda. So that's what I can tell you at the moment.
Do you know what subjects they might be interested in?
Well, I mean, two of the pen holders are focusing on humanitarian issues, so I would expect that we certainly have a meeting on humanitarian aspects of the war in Ukraine.
Thank you. We'll go to Pamela.
Thank you very much, Pierre, and thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for the briefing. It's Pamela Fall from CBS News. My question is a follow-up on Ukraine. There is the Peace and Security on the 23rd. Do you expect that to evolve into more about Ukraine? And in your national capacity, Switzerland has changed years of neutrality by joining Western sanctions and other issues supporting Ukraine against the Russian invasion. Where do you see Ukraine more specifically coming into the debate at this month?
I mean, it's not up to us to speak for the statements other countries may make, but you were alluding to the debate on protection of civilians on the 23rd of May. So this is going to be a debate on protection of civilians everywhere in the world. As you know, there is also terrible crisis in other places. Our president, who will be chairing that meeting, has been traveling in several countries in Africa. His most recent trip was to the east of DRC. So I expect him also to talk about crisis and the way civilians can be protected in other places of the world. But of course, I think there will be several meetings where the Russian military aggression on Ukraine will be addressed. On your second question or remark, let me maybe disagree in a respectful way. Switzerland has not changed anything when it comes to our neutrality. We have indeed often been following and taking over EU sanctions for the last nearly 30 years. We have always been principled in our approach, so neutrality has never meant that we are indifferent when it comes to breaches of international law or of a massive breach of the Charter. So our position on this aggression has been clear from day one. And it's not a matter of neutrality or not to criticize violations of international law. You find a long-standing tradition. We are also the hub of humanitarian affairs in Geneva, not only with the ICRC. So that has been a long-standing tradition and position of Switzerland. And of course, we are not giving up that tradition.
Thank you very much. Good clarification.
Sir, please.
Nabil Abisab Al Arabi TV station. On protecting civilians in conflicts, what's your approach on the Syrian refugees? Because now this is a hot topic in the region, and a lot of governments, people, politicians are calling for them to go back to Syria. So do you think that they should be protected in Syria when they go back? You think local communities in Syria should be supported to be able to host them back when they come back home? And my second question is on the Security Council role. Do you think that the Security Council is sidelined in many conflicts? Because we see now that the peace process in the Middle East, for example, we see a parallel track. We see different meetings where the UN is absent. The same is in Syria now. We see a lot of meetings taking place in the region, and the UN is not there. So what do you think that the Security Council should do?
Thank you very much for those questions. On Syria, I mean, of course, the goal should always be that refugees can go back home. But in order for them to do that, based on also international refugee law, you need the circumstances that they can do that safely and that they are protected. So when it comes to the war in Syria, the crisis, it has been going on for much too long. And I think it needs a political solution, first of all. And only when there is a sustainable political solution, all the circumstances will make it possible that also the refugees can go home. So that can be the case in some parts, at some moments, but in order to have everyone being able to go home and have a safe and prosperous environment, we urgently need a political solution to that crisis. When it comes to the role of the Security Council, it's of course always a discussion of the glass half full or half empty. There has been times in history, think of the Cold War, where the situation or the role of the Security Council has been much less than it is currently. But of course, the Security Council should be able to do much more. And for that, it needs more trust also amongst Security Council members. And that's something we should really concentrate on and work hard on. The Security Council, however, has always been only one, even so it's a powerful, maybe the most powerful international body on peace and security, but it's just one in the peace architecture. Think of the regional organizations, for example, the African Union, when it comes to the African continent. Think of the governance structures of states. Think of the work communities have to do to resolve conflict. So if we want to have sustainable peace in a certain country, in a certain context, it always needs all those pieces of that puzzle to work together in the best possible way. And I think the Sudan context, you just heard Stefan discuss the different roles of the Secretary General, of the Security Council, or the African Union, or the IGAD. If those pieces come together best, that's when we can be most effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mario Villar with the Spanish news agency EFE. Do you expect any follow-up to the meeting on Afghanistan that is taking place in Doha at the Council? And are there any discussions among members on the future of the relationship with the Taliban, or how to deal with the Taliban right now? Thank you.
Well, let me say first that the Council has been very active on Afghanistan, has been able 3 times to adopt a resolution. One, the extension of the mandate. Second, an independent review and not later than last Thursday, a very clear voicing of condemnation of asking the Taliban to take back those decrees. So I think the Council has been very active. Now, as you heard from Stefan, you have the envoys meeting in Doha, and by the end of the week, we should have first elements of an assessment of the mission itself, of UNAMA, and then, of course, you have also seen that the Secretary General has now announced the leader of that independent review, which is our former colleague from Turkey, Feridun. And so there will be a lot of activities on Afghanistan in the coming days or weeks. Will it come back to the Council immediately? I cannot tell you. It really depends on what this Doha meeting brings and what the following actions may be.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. You spoke in your remarks about 2 points. Also, and you are inviting the chief commander to the briefing on the 25th about peacekeeping, and you spoke about also international law. So I want to start with UNSO. It's 48. It was established 48 to observe the truce in Palestine. We are 75 years later, and the state of Palestine, which the UN was supposed to establish based on Resolution 181, 1947, is not yet there. So they keep talking about two-state solution, which is just a rhetoric, nothing. There is no chance for a two-state solution. I want your opinion. The second, you are the custodian of the 4th Geneva Convention. And you know what it talks about, how to protect the civilians under occupation. So being loyal and honest with the rules and regulations and the items of the 4th Geneva Convention, can you address the violation of Palestinian civilian rights under the Israeli occupation? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And can I repeat the disclaimer I made at the beginning, just that I do not mention it with every sentence, but of course everything I say which goes beyond the dates and the topics on the agenda is in my national capacity. So let me come to UNSO. You know the mandate of UNSO. It's a regional mandate. It's a mandate of trying to somehow reconcile and make sure that there is not violence coming up, and I think it's not a mandate which can powerfully intervene, but it's a very important mandate. And to make it clear, our force commander, Patrick Gosha, will be here, but he is not here to participate in the Council's meeting, because the Council meeting will be on African-led peace operations and how to sustainably finance them. So this is a different topic. He will be here because there is, of course, also all the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the peacekeeping, generally speaking. And the day after, on the 26th, we will have a meeting and a discussion at IPI on the future of peacekeeping. And that, I think, is a meeting that may address your other question. Of course, we are the custodian of the Geneva Conventions, and you hear us speak out loud and clear with regard to each and every violation, wherever it takes place. And many, many times you have heard us speaking out about violations of the Geneva Conventions in the Middle East. At the same time, it's a bit the question, how can we react to violations? How can peace operations, peace missions respond to that in a more effective ways? 75 years after somehow they have been established, maybe in a different world. And so I think this is a broader discussion. I understand your frustration. Every victim is one too much. But, you know, we have to somehow try to come up with new responses. And that's also why we have this kind of a motto or leitmotif for our month, a new agenda for peace. That's what the report of the Secretary General is also called, because I think there is really many, many places where we fail in addressing violations. But I also must reiterate that the first responsibility of the protection of civilians is with the countries and the states involved. And that the UN cannot replace.
Next question, Celia.
Ambassador, on the 16th, you're going to have consultation on peace and security in Africa, and you're going to talk about the fourth G5 Sahel. Knowing that the G5 Sahel is at a standstill, what do you plan to achieve?
You know, we are the Council Presidency, so we are those who have to organize the meetings, conduct the business. We cannot somehow manage the substance. So we will have a briefer from the UN, we will have a briefer from the region, we will have a civil society briefing, and then the Council has to discuss how to manage and how to go forward with the G5 Sahel.
That's all?
Well,
I
I
mean,
think
if you talk about something, it's at least to get a result.
absolutely, but that's also why we have those discussions and why we try to have follow-ups after the discussions.
So we'll take now a question online with Iftikhar, AP of Pakistan. Please, go ahead.
Congratulations, Ambassador. By
Thank you.
now, all questions on Afghanistan have been asked. But may I ask you, what is Switzerland's stand on the reform of the Security Council to make it effective, representative, and accountable?
Thank you very much for the question. So you may know that, I mean, we have a clear position on the enlargement of the Security Council, have had for many years, that we are convinced it needs a better representation, in particular of the African continent. But we also are of the view that since this is a very complicated thing, the enlargement of the Council, we need in the meantime really to improve the working methods of the Council. And that's also why we started our efforts on working methods in 2005, 2006, after the then summit, because in the summit there, if you remember, under Jean Ping, who was the PGA then, there was nearly a breakthrough on council reform, and he then did not put council reform to a vote because he didn't want it to endanger the Peace-Building Commission and the Human Rights Council, which were born then. But what was clear, and that was actually the start of our commitment to working on working methods, is that the different positions of the enlargement groups, be it the G4 or UFC, they all agreed upon the fact that working methods have to be improved. And for a member like us, maybe every 20 years once serving in the council, it's much more important to know how the council comes to its decisions. So you said how to improve accountability. We have launched a couple of years ago a so-called code of conduct with the ACT group, the Accountability, Coherence and Transparency group. This code of conduct is kind of a self-commitment of countries that they would not vote against a resolution in cases of mass atrocities if that can be prevented. So we have been trying to get more and more member states on board, also very recently in the past days, and we are now at 129 or 130 countries, so we are reaching two-thirds majority, and we are discussing not later than tomorrow how this code of conduct could be implemented in the Council's daily work.
Thank you. Linda?
Thank you. Linda Fasulo, representing NPR at the UN. My question is regarding the DPRK. There is a session on the 24th on Resolution 1718, the committee's meeting. We also know that there is discussion of putting together a resolution in regard to the recent missile launches and all that. I was wondering if you have any sense, without giving away any details, if you think that this will actually come to pass, that a resolution would be offered and that there would actually be a vote.
I am not a prophet. What I can tell you again is the Swiss position on that. I mean, we have been working hard and trying to support building unity around the fact that there has been so many tests since the beginning of the year, so many violations of the resolutions the Council itself has adopted unanimously. And so, of course, we are continuing to work hard on that. And I hope that sooner or later, I mean, we managed with Afghanistan, so sooner or later we should manage to speak with one voice on DPRK in the Council. Let me say that not coming out with a product does not mean that not all 15 Council members share the concern around those tests and around the developments on the Korean Peninsula.
Yes, please.
National News Agency of Ukraine. Ukrinform, my name is Volodymyr Ilchenko. Switzerland provides significant humanitarian aid to Ukraine, condemns the Russian war, supports European sanctions, but doesn't want to allow the re-export of Swiss weapons, citing its neutrality. Do you think this issue can eventually be resolved in a positive way for Ukraine? And what is your personal position on that matter?
I mean, you mentioned it yourself. We are supplying a lot of humanitarian aid. We have a high number of refugees in Switzerland from Ukraine. There is a huge solidarity, also privately speaking, by Swiss people. When it comes to re-export of weapons, it's not even a matter of neutrality at the moment. We have a law on exportation of weapons and weapons material, and without breaking that law at the moment, it would not be possible to re-export those weapons. So as long as Parliament is not changing that, this is not going to change. I think the trade-off, and that's it's not my personal view, it's of course the government's position also. The trade-off is a little bit what can be the most precious contribution Switzerland can do, because we are talking about ammunition which would last a short moment. And I can understand every soldier without ammunition that he or she is angry without that. But, I mean, the question is, can we maybe make other contributions? So there has been already discussions taking place in Geneva. The Black Sea Initiative has been discussed several times in Geneva. So I think that's a little bit the trade-off around the question of neutrality policy. And that's, of course, something our government has to discuss and to decide. But so far, it's not possible without changing the law. But again, I would like to underline that we are very clear when it comes to the positions, to the condemnation, and also to the very practical support we have been giving to people from Ukraine.
The next question, Betul.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Betül Yürük with the Turkish News Agency Anadolu. I have two follow-ups on Ukraine first. Did Switzerland specifically choose not to have Ukraine on the Security Council agenda to maintain sort of that neutral position? And also, the grain deal will be expiring in the coming weeks on the 18th of May. We know that the Security Council has not much to do with renewing it, but are there talks among the member states to sort of persuade Russia? And my third question is on the cross-border, Syria cross-border aid resolution. Are there any discussions, or will there be any discussions on that during your presidency? And will Switzerland be the pen holder for such resolution? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I hope I will not forget any. So the first was if we did intentionally not put Ukraine on the agenda. No, of course not. I mean, the agenda is made of mandated meetings, and every additional meeting has to be brought in by one of the countries in the Council, and it's not the presidency, it's usually the pen holder. And as I said before, in particular, the humanitarian pen holders on Ukraine will most probably come and make suggestions if or when Ukraine will be put on the agenda. So I trust that we will certainly have it on the agenda in May. So that was the first one. Then the grain deal, there is intense discussions. You also heard it from Stefan. The deal so far has been between the UN, Turkey, Russia, and Ukraine. And so that's where the discussion take place. The Security Council has so far not been involved. And I think the Security Council would only be involved if someone puts that on the agenda of the Council. But I think let there be space for those discussions where they have to take place. And we all cross our fingers that this can continue because it's really saving lives all over the world. Then when it comes to Syria, we are, of course, with Brazil, the pen holder on the cross-border resolution. There is two things which have to be looked at separately. One is the two additional cross-border openings after the earthquake. And there it will depend very much on OCHA's assessment if they should be prolongated. But it has not been a Council's decision. It has been discussions in the Council, but then it has been a decision by Syria to open those two additional borders. And then the cross-border, which has been extended on the 9th of January, that comes up for renewal in July. So the discussion is starting, of course, informally, but there is many different things which the resolution itself will depend on, and we will have, we just had last week several discussions in the Council, and we will have the next discussion on the 30th of May. And I think that's when we see clearer, or when we can say a little more about what is coming up for the extension in July.
Mrs. Evelyn.
Thank you. Evelyn Leopold. I assume Ukraine has, Switzerland has Ukrainian refugees. How many? And secondly, on the veto, I expect as long as at least the war goes on and North Korea controversy goes on, you're going to have a veto every month. What's the procedure? Do you automatically go to the General Assembly, since you personally have been quite involved in this?
Thank you very much. We had around 70,000 refugees, so the numbers can change a little bit because some are going back, but that's roughly what I recall being the latest figures. When it comes to the veto initiative, which was an initiative which has been adopted by consensus in the General Assembly 26th of April last year, and we were one of the co-sponsors and of the initiators of that. The procedure is that when there is a veto in the Security Council, automatically it submits a report to the GA, and then the GA discusses the matter, except for emergency special sessions, which automatically have a link to the veto. So Ukraine was not a veto initiative discussion in the General Assembly, but was based on the emergency special session, while DPRK last year and also the cross-border veto had then an effect that there was a discussion in the General Assembly. So far, it has only been a discussion in the General Assembly. Of course, it's not excluded that the General Assembly, after such a discussion, would also take a decision. We are early in history to say what exactly the effects are. I think what is clear is that since the Security Council in some important crises is not strong enough in its responses. The General Assembly has been taking more responsibilities. That is an interesting development, and I think it could also maybe have the effect that the Security Council members will try to be more effective and come up with solutions and responses to crisis. That's at least what we hope for.
Thank you.
So we'll go back to you, sir.
Thank you. In fact, I want to go back because my question was not answered, Madam Ambassador. I wasn't asking about the mandate of UNSO. I know UNSO very well. I visited them even myself. I was asking about the catastrophe that befell on Palestinians in 1948 and keeping them displaced all those years. And there is a mandate by the GA to create 2 states. One was established and one is still waiting. That's my question. I want your input on that subject, that the seminal failure of the UN, the most catastrophic failure of the UN to keep the Palestinian dispossessed 75 years later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, I can not speak for the UN, but nationally. Nationally, we have been very engaged and committed in trying to find ways to really implement this 2-state solution. I remind you of the Geneva initiative. We also have a Swiss head of UNRWA. So we have been trying for many, many years to come up with ideas, with mediation efforts. We have a special envoy for the region. But of course, we are only one actor, and it's like with the Security Council, it needs in a peace and security architecture many and most of the actors to work together to really bring peace to the region. And I can sincerely say that I would so much hope for this region, which would be such a wonderful region, that it could be peaceful in a near future. That is at the moment not the case. I think what we can say when it comes to the Security Council, for the first time in 6 years, the Council was able to take a decision on the Middle East. In February, we adopted the PRST. This PRST led to some discussions in Aqaba and Sharm el-Sheikh before violence brought out again over the during the holy days. So I would very much hope that behind the scenes and as a follow-up to that PRST and the discussions in Aqaba and Sharm el-Sheikh, that there is real progress on the ground. That is so much that I can say, and I regret that I have to disappoint you, because I cannot, or we cannot, as Switzerland alone, bring peace to the Middle East.
Thanks, Ambassador. Thanks for the briefing. Regarding the meeting later in the month that your president is chairing, can we expect any other high-profile guests to join? And on Afghanistan, in your national capacity, obviously there's the meeting in Doha at the moment, but what is Switzerland doing when it comes to aid? Is Switzerland kind of reconsidering how it might be helping Afghanistan given these edicts by the Taliban? Thank you.
So the answer is yes. There is several other presidents, but I don't think that I can say publicly who. I would leave that to my colleagues. So we will have some high-level attendance. This said, our goal is not to have as many presidents as possible, but to have a really substantial discussion, which also leads to a follow-up. When it comes to Afghanistan, we are in the same dilemma like everyone else. So we had to evacuate our colleagues who were working in Kabul, but we have continued the projects. But we are in exactly the same difficult dilemma that if you stop the projects, you know that people will die. But at the same time, it's unacceptable, the conditions they have. It's not possible to implement projects without women being able to work. So it's a very difficult dilemma. And we do not have the magic solution to that. And I really hope that the Doha meeting, there is no Swiss envoy, but that the Doha meeting leads to a discussion of how to handle the situation, and that the Taliban are impressed also by the unified voice of the Security Council.
Ambassador, when the war in Ukraine started, we saw a lot of countries opening their borders to, to the refugees. Do you think it's going to be the same for the Sudanese? Will you open your border to the Sudanese, you and the Western world?
I mean, of course, it's always also a regional thing. I mean, of course, you open your borders more easily if it is in the region, and it also makes sense that you would not displace refugees around the world. So I am sure that we will take refugees if there is refugees, but it's also a geographical question. So I cannot say more than we are basing our refugee policy on the law, and the law is the same for everyone, finally.
We go to Toshi.
Hi, thank you, Pierre, and thank you, Ambassador. Toshi from Kyoto News, on the DPRK as usual. And obviously, the current sanction regime has not been able to prevent it from violating the Security Council resolutions. For the sake of argument, as the President of Council and as the chairperson of a 1718 committee, what kind of sanction do you think is necessary to stop them from launching missiles and possible nuclear tests? Thank you.
Again, I would not speak as a Security Council President and not as a chairperson of 1718 answering your question. I think, the panel of experts came up with a very strong report with very clear, analysis of where the sanctions are not implemented well. And again, it needs all elements to come together. And I think we need to go back. I come from a country, and that may sound not strong enough, but a country which is convinced that it's only by dialogue that finally you can resolve crisis and come to political solutions. So I would hope that we go back to six-party talks or another format of talks where, on one hand, the sanctions could be implemented in a better way, and on the other hand, we could find other incentives than just continuing to violate Security Council resolutions.
Next question, Edith.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. One issue before the Council that I don't see on the program of work is the request by the Secretary General and the Haitian government for an armed intervention force to try and deal with this escalating gang violence. Why isn't it on? Has it been discussed? Do you see any possibility of progress in actually getting a force to Haiti?
It has been discussed last month in April, and it's an ongoing discussion also behind the scenes, because it would be a lead nation, and I think that is the most difficult part, because it's a very concerning, deteriorating situation. So also for a country which would take that responsibility, it's a very dangerous environment to operate. It's also difficult to imagine what kind of mandate that could be. I think that's once a crisis where there is quite a lot of council unity, but no magic solution so far. But the discussions are ongoing. And I actually hope that we do not have to go to emergency sessions on Haiti this month, but the situation on the ground is really bad.
Any more questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Thank you. My name is Yusuke Hirata from Sankei News, Japan. And the government of Japan will host the G7 summit this month. And my question is regarding relationship or interaction between UN system, so of course including Security Council and General Assembly, and G7 or G20 other international forums. And so do you see any interaction or relationship of these forums to maintain international order or find out solution on Russian aggression against Ukraine? Thank you.
I mean, the G20 and the G7 were founded more on economic issues, while the Security Council has a mandate on peace and security. So there has been mostly informal interactions more with the ECOSOC when it comes to the G20, for example, or also the Bretton Woods institution. So there is no formal or also informal relation between the Council and the G7. But of course, there is several G7 members, including Japan, who are on the Council currently. And so I guess they will probably bring back some of the discussions which were led in the G7 format in one or the other way into the Council's discussion on the specific topics on peace and security. And I understand also the Secretary General is attending the summit, and he will come back immediately afterwards and speak about international humanitarian law on the 23rd of May in the Council. So somehow it's persons who make the link mostly, but there is no formal link for good reasons actually with the Security Council.
Any more questions, or we should go to
lunch?
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.